Let's go now to our panel for legal and political analysis on all of this. I'm joined by former federal prosecutor Renato Mariotti, NewsNation legal contributor Jesse Weber, and Julia Manchester, political reporter for The Hill. Thanks all of you for being here. Renato, I'd like to start with you. Talk about how the indictment in Georgia, which names Donald Trump and 18 others, is different from the federal indictment, which names only Donald Trump. Is he accused of the same crimes in two different indictments?
He's not. So there's some obvious difference. In one, we have a federal indictment that's charging federal crimes, such as, for example, a conspiracy to defraud the United States. In the other, we have a bunch of series of state crimes, including RICO. And the bottom line is, if I was going to look at these indictments at a 10,000-foot level, Fani Willis was using a sledgehammer while Jack Smith was using a scalpel. Jack Smith had very carefully chose a handful of charges. He tried to avoid some of the more difficult issues, First Amendment issues. He actually wrote people like Mark Meadows out of the indictments because he may use them as a witness. Right. He only charged one person, Donald Trump. Obviously, Fani Willis threw the book at Donald Trump and everyone else she could charge.
But Renato, a RICO case in essence charges there was a conspiracy, that there were all these disparate, discrete alleged crimes by all these different people, all with one aim: to overthrow the election in Georgia and give the state to Trump. How difficult are RICO cases to prove, these kinds of big conspiracies?
So they are more difficult to prove. When I was a federal prosecutor, I avoided charging RICO because it's more complicated. You have to charge that there is an enterprise, for example, criminal enterprise. You have to try to link up these crimes to that enterprise, a whole bunch of underlying crimes. It's more complicated. And you know what? When it's applied outside of the context of drugs, gangs, organized crime, a lot of jurors are scratching their heads wondering what racketeering has to do with that case. So it is complicated. It does have some benefits for the district attorney. She can sweep in more evidence, have a more wide-ranging case, but she's kind of got a tiger by the tail here. She's bitten off a lot, and the question is whether or not she's going to be able to get it done and prove this case, even though it's very sprawling.
Jesse, does she have to prove that Trump knew that, people were bullying election workers and people were going down into another county and breaking into voting machines, or not?
So for the RICO charge, not necessarily, right? As long as they had this common scheme, this common purpose.
This common goal.
This common goal. Think about like a mafia boss. He may not know what the underling is doing in terms of, any kind of loan sharking or anything like that. But here's what you have to remember. The underlying charges that Trump is hit with, those predicate acts, there is a criminal intent aspect to there. And we've talked about it with the federal case. It applies here as well. Trying to show that Trump knew what he was doing was illegal, specifically that he was soliciting these public officials to break the law. That is an element that's going to be central to the prosecution's case and not always easy to prove.
We have said that this case offers the greatest threat of actual prison time, because there is a mandatory minimum of 5 years in prison, and no president can pardon somebody out of that, right?
Let me one-up you. Not only can the president himself or another president pardon himself, the governor of Georgia cannot pardon President Trump if he's ultimately convicted. In Georgia, there is a board that is established to grant some sort of leniency. Here's the thing. They won't be able to do it until Trump is convicted and only after he would serve some time. So his best options to get out of this are A, become the president, or B, ultimately win this at trial.
Becoming the president won't stop it.
Well, then you deal with an issue of would he actually be tried as the sitting president. I don't think this case is happening in the next 6 months. Okay, I don't think it's happening before the election. Then it becomes a legal question. Can you try a sitting president on state charges? I don't think so. I think it's going to be pushed forward till after he leaves office. And then what's the world going to look like then?
Renato, I have to say, as I was watching Fani Willis last night say that she wants to charge all of these defendants together in 6 months, I dropped my cup of tea. I mean, how is that even possible?
Well, look, it's not possible to get this done in 6 months. I'll just say that straight. I think your instincts are correct, even if you're not a lawyer. But it is not uncommon to have a sprawling indictment with 19 plus defendants. And I've been inside the courtroom when my colleagues were trying these cases where you had so many different defendants at different tables with different defense counsel. It was like a circus. But that slows things down when you.
Thanks so much for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.